What's up, everybody? Bobbywow here, your host. No Geek, no Josh today. It's just me. So let's do this thing.
Wow.
Pumped to dive in. We've got the 49ers versus the Lions tonight for our Showdown breakdown, okay? And this is interesting because the game doesn't necessarily mean anything for the Lions. No matter what happens tonight, Lions are playing for that top spot next week against the Vikings. And the 49ers have obviously already been eliminated. But the good news is we've got some confirmation here from Dan Campbell that he is going to play to win the game. Okay, so he's going to play his starters. And Dan Campbell is one of the few coaches I feel like we can trust. So that's good news for DFS purposes. But I think it's important to start there. Look, 49ers are going to play their starters. Lions are going to play their starters. Again, meaningless game for both. So if the Lions are up big, if they're up a touchdown or two touchdowns, probably two scores or three scores even in the third or fourth quarter, we could start seeing guys like Gibbs maybe come out of the game a little bit, maybe a boost for guys like Craig Reynolds if the game gets to that point. But when Dan Campbell says we're going to play to win, I trust that Dan Campbell is going to play to win. So going into this game, under the assumption that all starters are going to play starter reps. So let's dive in here to the domination station and take a look at what we got going on here. So this is again, Lions at 49ers. So 49ers at home taking on the Lions. It was the 49ers last year that ended the Lions playoff hopes. And so, now the roles have kind of reversed here. 49ers have a chance to play spoiler, and I think they will want to win, and vice versa. Dan Campbell wants to take care of the team that took care of the Lions last season. So I do think this is going to be a fun game, and we see here 50-point total. I think it's up to 50.5 right now. So lots of points. Lions favored by 3.5 was the last I saw on the line. And again, competitive game with the starters. This should be a ton of fun. So let's take a look here at some of the ownerships. One of the first things we typically do is want to dive into the game as a whole, the overview, the matchup, and then just take a look at what we got going on here for ownerships. It looks like as far as captain goes, we're seeing tons of ownership on Jahmyr Gibbs, which makes total sense. And let me know if you guys can see this okay, or if we should zoom in a little bit. But it looks like Gibbs, the clear top own spot. That is not surprising at all. I think he's the clear-cut top option here, followed by Jauan Jennings, which is kind of interesting. Deebo Samuel, who finally looked good last week. It looks like he's at 10.5%. Then you got a couple guys here and closer to 10% with Brock Purdy. Amon-Ra, a little bit lower than I would expect him to be, followed by Laporta and Kittle. And then from there, some of the lower owned guys with Garendo, who's back and starting for Patrick Taylor, and Jamison Williams, kind of a boomer bust guy. And then it gets really light from there. So interesting at the cap and exposure here. Take a quick look at the flex, and then we'll dive into the matchup sheet. Somewhat of a similar story here. Tons of Brock Purdy, tons of Gibbs. Jauan Jennings, again, up there, far higher than Deebo Samuel is, which we'll talk more about Jennings later, but that's still interesting to me. We got Goff, who I think makes much more sense as a flex option than a captain. And then Laporta, Deebo, and ASB. Cool. Let's take a look at the matchup sheet, because I want to get a better idea of what's the type of snap counts these guys are playing, how often they're on the field, target percentages, things like that. So starting with the 49ers, we know Brock Purdy will be the chalkiest player on the 49ers in terms of ownership here. He's been solid. He's capable of producing a big score. I do think he is capable of potentially sneaking in a captain as well. So I know, man, Geek isn't here to say this. He typically will never roster quarterbacks at captain, and it makes a lot of sense to me. But I do think both quarterbacks you could make a case for. Obviously on FanDuel, where quarterbacks and running backs are king at MVP, but also on DraftKings, where we typically don't play quarterbacks all that much. So I think Brock Purdy is certainly in consideration there. He's got solid weapons. He's capable of getting it done. He's at home. The Lions, they're a little bit worse on defense against the pass than they are the run. So let's not ignore Purdy here. We've got Garendo, who has been out until this week. He looked really good in this role when he was healthy a couple weeks ago, and so expecting Garendo to get full run here now that he's healthy again. He's a fantastic play in the flex. Not sure that I can get there at captain, just because the Lions have been really tough against the run. But Garendo should play the bulk of the snaps here, and again, one of the better flex plays on the slate. Patrick Taylor, he will go back to that RB2 role, very, very limited role. He didn't even do anything as the starter. It was kind of like a Shanahan juke almost, where he didn't get a ton of reps. I think he ended up with like 10 or 11 carries as a starter and did absolutely nothing with them. So almost safely ignore Patrick Taylor on this slate. We'll see what his price is in a second, but man, he hurt a lot of people, including myself, when he was a starter. So Garendo over Taylor here. George Kittle, absolute beast. He's getting almost 20% of the target share on the season. He plays just about every snap. Last week, he was at a 23% target share. Again, solid option. We've seen his ceiling be high enough to take a tournament down at captain. Love us some Kittle. And then the wide receivers. You got Jennings, who's going to be the chalkiest wide receiver on the slate. Guy that's getting 20% target share on the season. Not so much last week, but playing more snaps than any other wide receiver. Again, essentially last week he was essentially out there every single snap, and he's been solid. We haven't seen the big scores out of Jennings that we did earlier in the season. I think he had one massive week where he ended up scoring 3 touchdowns. So that ceiling is high, but it's not very often that he's getting there. So more of almost like a consistency type of player here in Jennings, who has the ability to score well, but more of a once in a while type of thing. Followed by Deebo Samuel, similar story here. Playing 80% of the snaps, got 23% of the target share last week, and he got a fair share of rushing opportunities as well. So Deebo finally broke through last week. Can we expect it again this week? Can we expect a back-to-back from Deebo after really, really a brutal season overall? I don't know. I think that's a tournament question. Is Deebo? We got a question here. Is Deebo washed? I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say it's been a rough season for him. It feels like things haven't been right mentally even. He's gotten in a couple of fights, said some weird things in press conferences, but I do think Deebo's a beast. I think, could he show out again today? Certainly. He definitely could. Could he also kill your lineup with a really low score because his floor is low? Yeah, absolutely. So Deebo is kind of the definition of a tournament play here, but you got to pay attention to him after last week's game. And then Ricky Pearsall, WR3, very similar snap counts here that you're seeing. 72% of the snaps last week. Didn't get a ton of targets, but this guy has been involved. Pearsall, he's really slotted himself into this WR3 role with Ayuk out. And again, another guy that we need to pay attention to, especially at his salary. I think he's a very intriguing option, especially as the game goes on. If we do see the Lions, kind of pull away here, maybe that does mean more opportunities for a guy like Ricky Pearsall. But either way, he's going to be in the game, and he's been getting targets from Purdy. He's worth a look at this price. So that's about it for the 49ers. Very straightforward, very simple, keeps it easy for us. We got, Kittle as the primary tight end with, Sobert mixing in, gets a target or two. I want to say Sobert caught a touchdown last week, but, chat, correct me on that if not. But again, very limited snap counts. This guy's in there 15% of the snaps, maybe 1 or 2 targets last week. So more of a turtley option. And a wide receiver. they play three guys for the most part: Jennings, Debo, and Pearsall, and that's been it. These are the only three guys getting targets at wide receiver. So nice and simple. I think we're going to see something similar with Detroit as well. We've got, Jared Goff, phenomenal. He's been as efficient as it gets this season. The thing with Goff is he's a guy that gets vultured by the run game quite a bit. Whether it's the run game or it's these trick plays where, you have an end around, someone's Gibbs is throwing a pass to Laporta in the end zone. Goff seems to be on the short end of the stick when it comes to vulturing. However, it does feel like that has changed a little bit with Montgomery out. So, I talked a little bit earlier. I said Goff may be considerable at captain. I do think we have to consider him again this week. Gibbs is a guy that can catch touchdown passes. We didn't quite see the vulture and full force that we typically see with these running backs on Detroit. And, Goff has put up some solid scores, 28 points last week, 44 points the week before. So we need, I'm going to say this for Geek. Geek would say probably knock off a captain. I do think we should consider him. But again, kind of got to balance that and his projected ownership, which is going to be a little bit chalky. Yeah, for those guys just getting in here, let's see. People just joining in, just real quick, cover the game overview. So this game is meaningless for both teams. Whether Detroit wins or loses, it doesn't matter. Their big game is next week against the Vikings. That's what will decide the number one seed, the championship, NFC champion, North championship, and then nothing here tonight matters. Lions could lose by 50, doesn't matter. They could win. Nothing changes for them. Obviously, the 49ers already eliminated, so this is more of a spoiler game for them. But Dan Campbell said very specifically, we are playing to win. We're not letting up. He actually, beat the media to the question at the press conference. So I am rostering players, and I'm building my lineups as if the starters are getting full starter reps here. Cool. All right, back to the Lions here. Jahmyr Gibbs, he's the guy getting all the snaps, 70% of the snaps, with Craig Reynolds spelling him just a little bit. I think all of us thought Craig Reynolds might see a little bit more work than he did last week. That wasn't the case. Got a couple of carries, a target. I would expect if there was a player that might be rested, more than anybody else, like if the Lions were to get out to a big lead or if this is an uncompetitive game, I feel like we'd see a little bit more Reynolds this week than we did last week. But again, I think Jahmyr Gibbs here is the star of the show. He's going to be the highest owned player across the whole slate, and rightfully so. This dude is going to get a ton of reps. He's been a beast, and he can do it all for the Lions. So love Gibbs. And I do like Craig Reynolds as well as kind of like a more pay down option on the slate. Shouldn't be highly owned. But if there was a guy to see more reps, legitimate, like significant more reps, I do think it would be Reynolds more than anybody else here. So a couple other guys getting a carry or two at running back. I'm not too worried about them. I'm not going to pay much attention there. I think it's Gibbs far and away the number one, and then Craig Reynolds kind of spelling him at RB2. Followed by tight end position, Sam Laporta, similar to the 49ers situation here. We got Sam Laporta taking all the snaps, 92% of the snaps last week. He's really kind of, after a really disappointing season, he's been much better as of late. So he's been finishing strong. I like what we've seen out of Laporta, and I think we could see him put up a good score here. He's capable, of maybe even captain just because of what he frees up with the salary. But really solid flex option for Laporta here, who's getting a 22% target share. Brock Wright is the TE2. He's on the field a bunch, but he's just not getting any targets. So you're looking for a guy that's on the field, Turtley option. I don't hate Brock Wright, but again, 50% of the snaps, didn't get a single target last week. That's tough. Not ideal. So Brock Wright, Turtley option at best here. And then Zylstra barely getting any playing time at all. Wide receivers, again, similar story to the 49ers, right? There's three guys that the Lions have been throwing the football to for the most part. That is Amon-Ra, far and away, number one. Jameson Williams, number two. Both guys, 85% snap count last week, getting solid number of targets. And then Tim Patrick here, who's become the wide receiver 3 with Khalif Raymond on the shelf. Similar story tonight. Tim Patrick's going to be in that role. Didn't do too much last week, but he's been a guy that can score touchdowns. He's been a target of Goff's too. We've seen him put up some really solid scores over the last couple of weeks. So Tim Patrick certainly in play as a flex option here. But as you get down the list, not much else to pay attention to. Another very straightforward team, keeping it nice and simple for us. Outside of a blowout, I would expect these 3 guys to be the primary targets at wide receiver. Laporta, obviously the guy at tight end. And then Gibbs with a little bit of Craig Reynolds spelling him, and maybe a touch or 2 for these 2 guys down here at running back. I love it when we get straightforward teams. It makes everything so much easier. People are asking about Geek. Geek is out just today. He's good. I don't believe he went streaking or got arrested, but I cannot confirm or deny. So we'll have to see what he says if and when he comes back. No, he should be back. He should be back tomorrow, and he'll be around as we kind of break down this final week of NFL games. But let's take a look here at the cheat sheets. DFS Up North, one of my favorite people on the entire planet, did the cheat sheet for this one. Dude's a stud. He knows his stuff. I hope he's doing okay. Thoughts and prayers to him. He lives way up north here. It sounds like we're going to get a polar vortex, so hopefully he can stay nice and warm. But DFS Up North on the sheet here loves Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously, favorite captain play, smash play on all sites, followed by Amon-Ra here and J-Mo. Looks like our second favorite options at captain. And then maybe some George Kittle and Debo, even Brock Purdy. It's kind of like those tertiary options for DFS Up North. And I would fully agree here. I don't know that there's anybody I would necessarily add in. He's got Laporta here at that price. He's, he frees up enough to get it done. I don't think he's got he can't outscore everybody by any means, but it's a pricing thing on DraftKings with him where he frees quite a bit up if he's played at captain. So deeper tournaments, intriguing at captain here, I'll say for Laporta. But I think your primary guys, Gibbs, Brown, J-Mo, and Debo for me. Debo is kind of that boomer bust guy who could put up a massive score, which he finally did last week. And then even a little bit of Kittle here mixed in as well. Not super pumped about the quarterbacks, but they are viable if you're dying to play a QB. Similar story in the flex. Same guys we talked about above. Love Kittle, J-Mo. Jahmyr Gibbs to me is a core play, and the flex on both sites. I don't know how you get around playing Gibbs unless Dan Campbell's a liar, which he hasn't been yet. I think Gibbs finds a way to get there either way. So to me, it's very close to all in for Jahmyr Gibbs on this slate in terms of at least being in the flex. I'll be close. I'll probably be in the 80% range, trying to double down here on what the field's doing ownership wise. Then we've got Kittle, Guerendo here, who solid play here. I agree, Mateo. I think that Guerendo can get it done. He's a guy that looked really sharp before he got hurt, and he was worked in as a pass catcher as well. So Guerendo's got some of that PPR ability. Not you're not going to get 10 targets, but he can get 3, 4, 5 targets and catch a touchdown pass. The issue for me is the price. It's just a little bit of a tough price to pay against the Lions, who are better against the run. And again, like you mentioned, Mateo, 49ers O-line is not in good shape. So tough to get there, but as you see here, he'll be one of the lower owned guys that are going to be getting, a significant number of reps. I would expect at least 15 to 20 touches from Guerendo here, which he could get it done, especially if Purdy's working him in to the pass game. So kind of more of like a GPP leverage play, Guerendo here. Kittle solid, Debo Samuel, boomer bust. Pick your poison there. Debo could score you, a bunch of points. He's cheaper than Jennings. He could put up another 25 points, and that would probably get it done at captain here. Or he could put up 4 or 5 like he has for most of the season. So boomer bust option with Debo. I do like trying to get overweight a captain, though, after seeing his ownership. Love Laporta, super cheap. One of my favorite flex plays as well on DraftKings. And then you got Tim Patrick and Pearsall as kind of like these pay down below the kicker options, who are far and away, to me, your best bets. And, it looks like DFSupNORTH agrees with a little bit of 49ers defense. And then the only thing I might change is Craig Reynolds. We got burned by him last week. Maybe it's a similar story this week, and we also saw there's a couple other guys that got a couple snaps at running back, but I do really think, if and I think the Lions can get out to a two score, 3-score lead here in the second half, we could see a little bit more of Reynolds spelling Gibbs. So we'll see. I'll be probably double the field on Reynolds, closer to 25-30% here. But otherwise, full in agreement with Josh's notes. So love these, Lions, 2 Lions guys, Gibbs and ASB. And then, I think San Francisco's got a couple of legitimate captain options as well with Kittle and Deebo Samuel. Juwan Jennings, he can get there. Not as excited about him. He can get there, but and then we talked about it a little bit too, these quarterbacks as well. Thanks for that. Oh, I'm not going to put that up on the screen, but I know Geek would be here if he could. So, obviously he misses you guys, and he rocks at this, man. He makes it look so easy. It's crazy. That dude's just a stud. Anyway, talk about how much you miss Geek in the chat. I'm sure he would appreciate that. I've got a question from Dixon here. What if this ends up being like a 6-3 game, like the Bears game? Man, first off, I want to apologize on behalf of my Bears for everyone that had to watch that game. That was disgusting. Now, I will say that's somewhat of a regular occurrence for me as a Bear fan. That is not super out of the ordinary. But horrible game, horrible execution on the Bears. Everything was just a mess. I can't imagine this game ends up 6-3. 50.5 point total. I think the total on the Bears game was in the upper 30s. So this will not be a 6-3 game. I'm just going to put that out there. If it is, love Gibbs, love Garendo, love the kickers and the defenses. But that is, man, this is the opposite. These two teams are the opposite of the Chicago Bears. So I'm not worried about that, Dixon. Yeah, and then just to round this out, the one thing we didn't talk about here was the defenses. 49ers defense, they're at home, which is interesting. But they're a little bit slim due to injuries, and the reality is Jared Goff just doesn't turn the ball over a ton. This Lions team takes care of the football. So the Niners probably need to score a touchdown to be viable here. It could happen. They could get a kick return touchdown even. But I do think it's kind of a longer shot for the Niners, who are really cheap, though. It's interesting. Lions, I think that defense is going to be fired up. They don't want to lose to this 49er team again. They want to prove that they can, beat them down a little bit and also just get some momentum for that game coming up next week against the Vikings. You don't want to lose here to the 49ers and kind of have that lingering over you as you try and match up against Minnesota for the NFC North title. So that's about it for me. Lions, I do think are playable, a little more expensive than I'd like, but they're going to be fired up. Trust me. And we could see a 49ers team that knows the season's over. We'll see what happens here, but I do think the Lions are viable. I think that's about everything. We talked about the matchups. We talked about the cheat sheet. Why don't we go try and maybe build a lineup here? So we've got, let's kind of start with a safer lineup, I would say. So to me, let's plug in Gibbs. He's far and away the most expensive, but I think has the best shot of getting there at captain. Gibbs, followed by, I do like Kittle quite a bit. Jameson Williams, more of a GPP guy. Man, I like Garendo too. Kickers, talk about the kickers. absolutely kickers are viable here. Bates, Moody, both guys are solid. I'll probably be a little bit overweight on both kickers. So I do love the kickers. Again, trying to be a little more safe here. Yeah, to me, man, if I could get to ASB, which is going to be tough, I would love that. But yeah, I don't know that we're going to be able to do it here. We'd have to do something like this where you got Craig Reynolds in there, which I don't love a ton with Gibbs at captain, and then maybe round it out with Pearsall. That's a no QB lineup. I don't know. It's a little fun, but I don't love that. And then let's see, we've got let's do another one. That one, I'm not super excited about that one. Let's see. We'll just go to this contest for now. Draft another one. I do think there's a scenario where Goff gets there. And to me, that would be, you're probably trying to sneak all these guys in there. Juszczyk's I forgot about Juszczyk. Juszczyk, he's playable. He got 3 targets last week, 3.6 points. He'll randomly have a game like this where he ends up scoring a touchdown, or he ends up, having a longer catch. But it's very rare that it happens. Could we see it the last week? Maybe. So I guess Juszczyk is a puntable turd, I suppose. But it gets ugly down here real fast. There's not a ton of min price turds that I'm interested in playing. I think for me, it's maybe Juszczyk. If you're running 150 lineups, I think Reynolds is probably the most sensible punt. But again, he didn't get much run last week, so it's no guarantee he gets run either. I do think Tim Patrick's intriguing. Ricky Pearsall is one of my favorites in this range. I think the Niners get him involved tonight more than he has been, and he's shown some solid potential here with the 49ers. So I do like Pearsall at that price. We talked about Laporta. I do like Laporta too, and that kind of keeps us down here in that Reynolds Juszczyk range, which I don't love. I guess you could throw Tim Patrick in here and then maybe even get a defense or a kicker. Let's say we got Moody in here at home. I don't know. There's another kind of variation of an interesting lineup where the Lions kind of smack down here. Lions onslaught. We got 4 Lions, 2 Niners. Kind of interesting in tournaments. Do maybe one more here with a little bit more of a more inexpensive captain. Let's see what we got with Laporta. I'm not super thrilled with this idea, but just to give you an idea of the salary that it frees up here, you plug Laporta in the captain slot, you got $82.60 left for the rest for everybody else. You come down here, you got Pearsall, one of my top targets as far as players below the kicker range. Fire up the Detroit kicker here if you want, or fire up Moody again. I mean, we can pay for anybody we want. You want Gibbs? Yes. You want ASB? Yes. And now, look at that. We have more money to spend than we could ever dream of. Maybe you want to get Kittle in there. And that leaves us in that awkward range too. Man, it's tough. Purdy's kind of been the guy that we've been leaving out. Let's see what happens if we plug Purdy. And again, kind of an ugly range here. One pass catcher isn't great. I wish we could get to Debo, but let's do this. Let's take ASP out. Let's roll Purdy, Kittle. And then we can wrap this thing up with either Debo, which would be interesting, or we get Goff in there. Can we? No, we can't. I'm going to go Kittle and then Debo. This would be really interesting right here. Again, this is more of a 49ers play where you've got a ton of 49ers guys contributing. Might even switch Purdy and Laporta here, but yeah, it's intriguing to me. I don't know. It's kind of intriguing. Laporta gets a touchdown, 10 catches, 100 yards. Goff doesn't quite make it in here because Gibbs is soaking up the other touchdowns as a runner. Man, a lot of ways you could go on this slate. Definitely more of a tournament slate, in my opinion. You've got, both teams are going to play their starters. We know that, but just like trying to look at it from an outside view, can you imagine if the Lions were up by like 2 scores in the fourth quarter and Gibbs gets hurt or something like that? I can't imagine Campbell would ride them if the game is not competitive as we kind of get toward the end here. So got a little bit of that in play, and then on top of it, some weird pricing for some of these guys. I don't know. I find myself leaving the quarterbacks out more often than not. So that's kind of the route I'm taking tonight. But again, I think, Gibbs clearly far and away the best play, like we talked about. We could take a quick look at the props projections here. Super, super helpful as you're trying to weigh playing one player over another. I look at this prop projection on Gibbs at 22.5 points. That's beautiful. Far and away the highest on the slate. Followed by, looks like ASB and Goff are up there. Sort by this. And then you've got Purdy's up there as well, 18 points. That's a solid prop projection for Purdy. Jennings, Debo, not so much, not projecting as well. Yeah, this is intriguing. I think a couple of guys we didn't talk about, Jameson Williams, he's a guy that's boom or bust. He could make it happen. He can beat the Niners over the top. Kind of a sneakier captain play tonight. What do we got here? Okay, we got Debo at 11%. Jameson is at 4.5. So, these two guys, if I'm looking to get a little bit unique at captain, Jameson Williams is one of them for sure. Sam Laporta, again, more because of the salary he frees up, but he's had some better games as of late. Kind of interesting there. I don't think I'm getting down to Patrick at captain. Maybe if you want to get super silly in 150 lineups, throw a couple darts at Ricky Pearsall just in case. He's probably the cheapest viable captain, in my opinion. From there, it's just crazy to me. We're not Kyle Juszczyk a captain. Come on, that's a little silly. George Kittle, Guerrero is one of the most intriguing pieces of the slate to me because he's probably taking away from Purdy if he's doing well. So I don't know that I'd put these two guys in the same lineup necessarily, or I'd probably try and avoid it. Because Guerrero's so priced up, he's going to be really low owned across the board. So I think Guerrero is a unique option, more of an option in the flex for me. But again, if you're running 150 lineups, definitely take a few shots on a guy like Guerrero who's going to get a bunch of touches in this game. Looks like people are asking about Debo here. Debo's captain ownership, we got 11%. So it looks like people are willing to chase last week's game, which is interesting to me. Obviously it could happen again. We've seen Debo kind of get into stretches where he's hot and cold. Certainly possible he could do it again tonight. He's part of the reason is because he's relatively cheap, kind of considering how much he's going to be on the field. But again, you look at the props projection, Juwan Jennings, almost 2 full points better for only $300 more. That's something that's definitely intriguing. Along with Kittle here, Goff. Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered it all. Gibbs, far and away the safest option. To me, he's a cash lock at captain. And if not a captain in the flex, if you're playing cash, excellent tournament play too. Just want to make sure you get different elsewhere. He and Purdy, the only two with 100 DS ratings on here, which let Jesus take the wheel in some of these cases. More often than not, it shows you the way. shows you the light. So weird quiet Dobby was doing. Cool. I think we've got it all covered. You know, feel free, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We got Geek back for the next podcast, so don't worry. Our fearless leader is going to return. But let's have some fun this slate. You know, I don't have FanDuel up, so I wasn't able to get FanDuel working on here. I thought it was just Geek. I really did, but it's a FanDuel thing maybe. So I don't have FanDuel projections up. You know, we could take a quick look at the cheat sheet here and see if anybody stands out. You know, QBs and running backs are king here, and DFSupNORTH nailed it. He's got Goff, Gibbs, the top two options, followed by Purdy, Samuel. I would include Garendo here as well, you know, as kind of like a sneaky GPP captain. I think he's the one guy I would put up here that isn't in here, but otherwise fully agree with this. See if there's any value here. Like, I think Garendo at 10.5 is just too cheap in the flex. Like, it's crazy, guys. The Lions are really good, don't get me wrong, but you know, that's a very interesting price for him. Deebo Samuel at 10K, cheap. Laporta 9.95 is cheap as well. Let's see if we got any true value, guys. I think Pearsall at 8K is very intriguing. You don't get the full PPR on FanDuel, but look at this ownership. 8% ownership on FanDuel at 8K. I'm taking some shots at Ricky in the flex for sure. And then Craig Reynolds is the guy that I mentioned as someone I'll be overweight on, kind of one of the turtlier options that I'll be overweight on here. But otherwise, nothing crazy. You know, lots of turds, lots of guys that I'm not paying much attention to. You know, use check we talked about, I guess. I can't stand him, but I guess. Brock Wright gets an occasional look. Sobert caught the touchdown last week. Might be his only one of the season, but you know, I guess he's in play at 5,500, but otherwise kind of playing this the same way. You know, quarterbacks and running backs, smash them in. Nobody's that expensive here. And I think it's relatively straightforward. Lots of Gibbs, lots of Goff, lots of Purdy, and maybe some Garendo. Cool. I think that about covers it, guys. You know, thanks for hanging with me. I know, my gosh, I can't believe this is the last game of week 17. Oh my gosh. Time has just flown. It's absolutely crazy. You know, after tonight, it's the last week of the season, and then we got playoffs. So soak it in, enjoy it, play some MME. Okay, I know we talk about it a lot, but if you can find a nickel contest, those are so much fun. Throw 150 lineups in using DS, and it really, really is a blast kind of watching your builds and tweaking things to your liking. But otherwise, helmets up. Let's take some down tonight. Let's win some money, and we will see you back here on Wednesday. Happy New Year, everybody.
Sheesh.